The Shabbat HaGadol finds us at a time of war. It seems that Pesach in Israel, in the Middle East, in Israel in particular, will be moving from the table to the shelter or the safe room, as it has been for the past number of weeks. There are a number of people who have already died in Israel, and of course, many, many people who died in Iran and in other places in Lebanon. Innocent civilians who have fallen in this war. And we're going to be sitting at our Seder tables on Wednesday night, and I wonder what will emerge from the conversations and what will emerge from the text of the Haggadah. Also, we find ourselves in our country not only at war, far away, but we have some very serious issues here in our own country. And so I just want to, Felicia and I, have a little conversation about some of the things that perhaps will emerge at the Seder, will just emerge, flow from the Haggadah. Going over the Haggadah, so the first thing that was really staring at my face are the words, Halach ma'aniya. This is the bread of affliction that our ancestors ate. Kol dichvin yeteh veyochal. All who are hungry, come and eat. And we're saying these words at a time when our country is not particularly embracing all who are hungry, come and eat. And the treatment not only of people who are dealing with poverty and with food insecurity, but also people who are coming here because they need to eat and to live, are treated with tremendous amount of cruelty. And so, what do you do about this, reciting this line on this year?
There's a beautiful tradition that I just when I was studying this week about one of the reasons it says that Shabbat HaGadol is called Shabbat HaGadol is because there's a tradition to bake a large challah and give it to the poor on the Shabbat in anticipation of Pesach, which is an interesting just like companion to Halach ma'aniya, which is like, how do we condition ourselves despite what is happening on the macro level? There's this is a very personal choice in our tradition to sit at the Seder table and say that. This is not a government decision. It's a conditioned orientation as a people to be attentive to this call and to open the door, to say, me, despite what. So I think, one of the questions this year is a deflection towards all the things that are hard, which are true. I think no one is living and feels that this time is a time of profound hope. We're living in a lot of discomfort and anger or despair at a lot of the choices, whether it's our governments or other governments are making. And yet there's something very true about what it means to just sit at your table, sit at our table, and make choices as a people, and that the tradition, I think, wants us to be heightened, no matter who else is telling a certain story out there, but that the story at our table should be conditioned towards that leaning. And so I think sometimes in the midst of such profundity of nervousness and uncertainty, and in some way not knowing what to do with the questions that are before us in large ways, it's actually helpful to sit at the table and ask the question in very small ways. and to say these statements as not something that it's someone else's responsibility, but like this challah and Shabbat HaGadol is actually on us. You know, that it's not just, I mean, the millions of people that are in poverty in our country are not in poverty because someone else decided they should be in poverty. It's because we've all colluded in a system that allows people to be in poverty, that allows people on our streets, that doesn't create supportive housing, like all the things that are true right here in our own neighborhood. And so I think there's some kind of layering of this, the way we tell the story, that says, where do I sit in the story? What power do I have in acknowledging this truth? And to not deflect the responsibility, actually, but to bring it right home.
So since we go from Halach Ma'aniya, then we go to Manishtana. And it says, Alayla Zeh, and it says, Ben Yoshvin uven Mesubin. So we're leaning, right? We normally sit, we're leaning. A lot of people are not going to be able to lean comfortably on this Pesach. In Israel, people who are going to be sitting at the Seder, I think, going to be sitting pretty on alert, right? And us here, it's difficult this year to be mesubin, to do the hasava, to just lean and experience, you know, the sense of I mean, we lean because we are free, and I find it challenging, to say the least, this year.
Rabbi Nami Kelman wrote a piece in the Times of Israel about that we should have our cups overflowing with Miriam's water at the table, and she said, you know, I don't know what will be. She said it's kind of like COVID. She lives in Yerushalayim, and it's like they're trying to decide, are they going to have Sedarim on Zoom? Are they going to sit at their tables and run back and forth, anticipating that the Hazakot are going to come? And so even that in of itself, and I feel like I've been asking the question these weeks, and it's like, what actually is freedom, right? We in a very constrained state, we're not the ones who are running back and forth in the middle of the night, although some of us have relatives who are doing that, or children who have experiencing that, or family and friends checking and sending WhatsApps all the time to check in to see how people are doing. And it really calls into the question, what is the freedom that the Haggadah is asking us? Because I think our notions of freedom are sometimes skewed about what is real freedom. Obviously, Jewish freedom, religious freedom is not the same as some of the freedoms that are spoken about, American freedoms. And I think that's a very powerful question these days. Like, what is freedom? You know, in our tradition, freedom is not a free-for-all, right? It's not having everything available to us. It's a directed freedom, which is why we make the walk to Shavuot. But even on the Seder night, like what are we trying to evoke? Yeah, sitting versus leaning, but what is that meant to represent in a sense? And maybe to ask the questions that certain things that we think, I mean, it relates also to halach ma'anya and the kind of society we live in, is what is our own freedom, but also what is creating a world of freedom.
The freedom is the freedom to free ourselves from the ways of old, and talking about mitchila, of the avodah zara yu avotenu. In the beginning, our ancestors, or where we come from, is people who were idolaters. But now, kervanu Adonai elenu lavodato. Now God has brought us closer to God's service, and to be free is really to be able to embrace wholeheartedly the ways of God, the service of God that is, we believe, a God of justice and compassion, and that longs for peace among God's creatures. That's the service that we long for. That's the freedom, I believe. It's to inhabit that type of a world. So I believe we're very far from that. We're still struggling to become free, to free ourselves from these ways which have become so mainstream in our world of cruelty and war and one country threatening another country, and we're very far from that. And it's not just about our personal freedom, it's also about the freedom that we experience as members of a collective, of a society, of a people, and then of a group of peoples, a community of peoples. I want to bring us I was looking at the 4 children.
Okay.
And I was looking at the 4 children, and I was asking myself which of the children speak this year to me. And for me, the simple child that says, Mazot, what is this? We're asking ourselves, what is this? What are we living through? And then very much identify with the one who doesn't know how to ask. I don't even know what else to ask. I don't know what the questions are that we should be asking ourselves in order to get ourselves out of where we are.
Which is the point of sitting at the table, and asking. We were at an event the other night, and Jody Cantor was the guest speaker at our rabbi circle, where of our largest donors of BJ, and Jody Cantor, who's the reporter from the New York Times. And I asked, what question did she think that the Jewish people should be asking now? And she said something very interesting. She said that she thought we should be asking, what is going on with antisemitism? And she didn't mean it from a place of to just say, let's talk about its roots. She's she's an investigative reporter. And she came at from the sense, what is really beneath this? And also, without also not, she was not saying it also to just a charge for the ADL. She was saying it to say, something is going on here. And she was also talking about the Jewish people, which is, the conspiracy theories about the Jewish people, but she was also asking, there's some truth too there. And again, she was not saying it from a left or right perspective. She was saying, what is going on here? And I feel like I've been thinking about that a lot, and the same about the question of freedom. What are we not asking? What questions are we afraid to ask? What kind of, I don't know, just easy answers that we're giving ourselves that make us feel better, but maybe we should sit with the simplicity of just asking a big question and then not finding reactive, quick answers to the question. And I think that's hard in our time because we want easier answers and we would like it to be able to fix it, but clearly certain problems haven't been fixed, certain solutions to what are perceived to be things that should be, we should have solved the questions of the occupation and the Palestinians, but it hasn't been solved. So clearly the options that were available aren't working. What is going on in our country around anti-Semitism is real. It's real. What is beneath it? Hello, Rabbi Danny. And so I think there's something about sitting in the unknown of that. And the other thing I just want to acknowledge is we've been talking about the tension, Roly and I were talking about the tension between kind of the immediacy of the redemption that is spoken about at the Seder table, that kind of that moment of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of crossing the sea, which is very large and very big. And at the same time, the tradition has a strong orientation towards a slow build, or a slow burn, you could say. That it's living with this tension between large redemption and a very slow move towards what it takes to come to this kind of redemption. And the stages, v'hotzeti, v'yitzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti, v'heveti, which are based on the cups of wine, are meant to both talk about different kinds of redemption, but that redemption isn't an all-at-once experience. So we're living with these kind of two, Heschel, we were talking about, Heschel calls it process and event. And that also I've been thinking about a lot. We see something where we think, I don't know, an example would be where the way Minneapolis rose up in the face of ice, and you kind of pin your hopes on this moment which says there's going to be a big rise up to say that's it, you know, and then you get disappointed when it's actually still a slow move of like the work of building redemption out of a given moment. So that's another question that I think we have to talk about.
So a lot of questions, fewer answers, which is what the Seder is about. And we hope that everybody will have a meaningful and meaningful Seders that will actually be very much connected and rooted where we are, each one of us, at this particular moment, with our fears, our aspirations, our dreams, our hopes, and also calling ourselves to act where we must in order to make ourselves freer and our world freer.